Ian, you directed the American version of Rock Doves, which opened to great reviews in New York. What way, if any, do you feel that this production will differ from the New York one?
Well, if we manage to be as successful with this as we were with New York, I would have to admit to being very happy. I think there are certain ways in which you don't want to sell yourself too high too soon, but I think there are certain ways in which we might manage to achieve even more than New York. We learned something from the script that we presented there, and in consequence of that we've made a few changes which we all believe hopefully will help. I think it's fair to say that in New York we probably had the whole package tied up a bit too neatly, and that the ending seemed a bit pat, and we're going to leave it rather looser and give the impression of, you know, sort of loose strands in the wind. You know, who knows how things will resolve themselves thereafter, and I think it will be more realistic for that, and that may well be a plus. Also, in that we're playing it with an entirely native cast and in our own environment where people either know the situation directly or certainly know of it, I think there'll be even more connection with the piece and probably even more connection with the humour. So in all of those ways you would hope and expect that we might have an even more positive time. But as I say, if we do as well in New York, I'll be pleased.
Okay, you mentioned we there, and obviously you're referring to your wife, who is also the writer of this piece, Mary Jones. So can I ask you, generally, as a director, how do you see the relationship between a writer and a director?
It's kind of difficult for me to answer that on a broad scale, because I've worked mostly as a director with Mary, and working with other writers I've had limited experience of that. In fact, most of the other writers I worked with at the time that I worked with them were dead, if you know what I mean. So I didn't have to consult them. My wife is far from dead, that's for sure. But I think really the big thing for a director is clarity and clarification. And the big thing for the writer is imagination and vision. So I think as a director, and also voice or style. So I think as a director, first of all, it helps if you can recognize the voice and the style of the writer and empathize with that, and that's the first thing you want to try and do. I think the second thing is that you know, you want to make sure that you understand, and that in turn your cast will understand exactly what it is the writer is asking for. And provided you understand, and there's a chance the audience will, but if you don't understand, the audience certainly won't. Sometimes writers are not very good at certain kind of basic things, like, you know, they may have a great sort of, like, you know, run through the script, and then you find yourself saying, I'm a little confused here about the time scale. Oh, I didn't think about that. And that's not an uncommon thing. There's quite a lot of writers, you know, may not necessarily have thought that through, and you may find yourself saying, well, look, can you address it? Or you might say, do you mind if I address it independently when we get into rehearsal? That's a for instance. I mean, there are several sort of like for instances like that, but mainly it's make sure that you understand what it is you're supposed to understand.
Okay, so on the subject of clarity, and with reference to Rock Doves, what do you feel the main message of the play is?
Ooh, the main message of the play. I think, I suppose at the heart of that is the thing that, in this particular play, the community in which it takes place is dominated by people who have a paramilitary background and who, you know, whenever that was going on, were very definitely in control. Although, in theory, that is behind us and has been behind us now for quite a lot of years, the reality in a lot of communities is that these people still have a huge amount of influence and sway. So I guess what we're talking about is how, is first of all highlighting that, and secondly talking about if we really want to move forward as a society, somehow or another these people need to be disempowered. And part of what is difficult about it is, if you're the individual in the situation, do you have the courage to stand up and do it yourself? Probably not. So then the powers that be, social services, local government, whatever, they have to in some way, police, they have to in some way be able to come in and address these issues. And who knows, perhaps with this whole process we're going through at the moment with the justice and so policing, who knows, perhaps these kind of things will be confronted full on, and that's really what you're honing in on, is somehow or another how you normalize these sort of societies, which unfortunately are still not so.
One of the central characters in the piece is a young boy who doesn't have a name as such, but encapsulates perhaps the problems that young people are facing in the post-conflict Northern Ireland. Is there any way in which you feel that the play would have a specific reverb for young people?
The fact that he's called the boy is significant in that he represents male youth, and as such he's vulnerable, and perhaps all male youth is vulnerable in these societies. Yes, one of the things that it kind of highlights is having heroes. Everybody often says to kids, you know, who's your hero? I actually think having heroes is a very, very difficult territory. And in many ways I feel it's probably better for people if they don't have heroes, or if heroes are at least assessed, put it that way. The problem with these kind of environments is that the heroes that are most immediately to hand are the ones who strut their stuff on the street. And the reason they strut their stuff on the street is because they have the money, they have the power, they have the guns, or whatever. And unfortunately, young people growing up can look at them and say, well, I want that. So next thing you know, they've fallen into that trap. And apparently, you know, from what I've been hearing recently, I mean, that is still going on. And if anything, unfortunately, it's actually burgeoning rather than diminishing. So I guess there's, in that particular respect, there's a kind of a salutary thing there for kids, like, you know, just be careful about who your heroes are and why you choose them. And the validity of having them. But obviously the fact that there is a young kid at the centre of this who is very much in a position of stress and is very vulnerable, I think in itself you know, should engage young audiences. The very fact that it's a contemporary situation that we're all aware of and that people can relate to should also engage. There's the language is the language of today. It's very entertaining, and the characters are wonderfully colourful characters. And Mari is, as she often is, very clever with this, in that it is she's dealing with what is a very political subject in a way, probably one of the most political pieces she's written. But she deals with it through the metaphor of being in this house and these people coming into this house, and the whole thing is played out within the house. The actual subject that you're dealing with, you never directly confront. You know of it through the characters that come into this space. And it's like a fifth actor, and it's all the more potent in a sense for not being directly shown to you. So I think in all those ways, I think young people should respond to it very positively.